right. Hey, good morning to everybody. This is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic. I know we got a lot of new subscribers, and so I just want to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing today. My name's Anthony Parent. I'm a tax attorney. I've been running the channel for 20 years, and with me are my great friends Keith Redmond and John Richardson. And really, for the past, hold on one second. I have a little feedback coming here. From my own, I hear the dulcet tones of my own delightful voice. Hang on one second here. Let me just. There we go. Now I'm not okay. There we go. We had a delay go to my ear. A lot better. Okay, that's a lot better. So I have John Richardson and Keith Redmond, and really since I think it was 2021, we picked it up, and we've been going every week. And you know, I've been picking up a lot more subscribers on the channel, and one of the reasons why I can sound like such a smarty pants, I gotta say, is because of this, because of our live podcast that I've been doing with John and Keith. John comes up with, he's really an independent thinker, and he makes me think about things, and really made some realizations. And then Keith is so poignant in his realizations of the issues going on and pointing out the questions, the hard questions that a lot of people in the tax industry don't want to answer because it sort of, it doesn't reflect well upon the whole entire industry.
Yeah, if I may want to just say one thing real quick.
You bet.
I'm back in the saddle again. I wasn't around for quite a while, and I just want to thank everybody who sent me the very kind messages about the death of my father. Greatly appreciate it. So thank you.
We're glad to have you back. Then God bless you, Keith, for everything you've done for your dad and your mom too. So wonderful, wonderful to have you back here. So what we have today. So that's what we're talking about today. So what we're going to be talking about today is how the Department of Government Efficiency, which I believe is pronounced Doge. For some reason I've never heard anyone pronounce it. Maybe I don't watch enough TV or I don't know. Will Doge look at the exit tax citizenship-based taxation enforcement calls? Worldwide taxation. What is it really costing the government? And we have a lot of interesting things, and we're not exactly sure I guess I'm not exactly sure what's real and what's fake, but I've concluded two things. Number one, I don't trust anything. I think there's a lot more things going underneath the surface. And number two, what is going underneath the surface has been going on a lot longer than whatever I have. So in my mind, I'm just sort of enjoying the ride. Wherever this is going, because I don't really think there's too much I could do to stop the inertia behind whatever it is that this government is. I don't think I can stop it, but what we can do is explain it so that we're not so lost, confused, wondering what to do, so angry. So that's what we're going to try to do today to get some understanding and to point out that Donald Trump, and really thanks to the efforts of our group, promised, Solomon, you especially, promised to end double taxation for Americans overseas. And in fact, it's not only the right thing to do morally, but in my mind, in my argument, is that it's the thing to do that will cost the government less money, that is going to cost the government a lot less money if it's ended. And the reason why is because the worldwide taxation is forcing many people around the world to renounce their citizenship. That's how inefficient our government is. These tax forms that people are required to file under penalties and confusion and horrible tax treatments, much worse than if they were the income was in the U.S., is forcing people to renounce, including the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, which now makes every foreign financial agency an agent of the U.S. government to sniff out data that the American government may want. So these are the things happening. And when we look at what the amount of money FATCA is bringing in, whatever little amount the exit tax is bringing in, and overall citizenship-based taxation, in my mind, and knowing this, that the IRS requires their best talent on these cases. You can't take these people away because once you assign a IRS employee to an expat case, okay, look, number one, it's going to take too much time and you're not going to get enough out of it. And right. So and that's really the point. So Keith, with that, your reaction to I want to get your reaction to what I'm saying, and your introduction and further introduction.
Well, no, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. And I think the proof is the devil's going to be in the details. on what is done to eliminate double taxation. Will it bring down the administrative work that needs to be done, not only for the American overseas, but also for the IRS? Keep in mind, the IRS they're firing a lot of people left and right, and the IRS commissioner is resigning if he hasn't done it already.
Yeah, he did.
So
He
they're
already
not going
did. Yep.
to. Okay, so they're
There's
not
a
going
there's
to
a new
have a
one
lot.
appointed. Yep. There's a new
Okay,
interim just appointed, Keith. Yeah.
gotcha. So with 6,000 people already fired from the IRS and more to come, how are they going to even manage homeland Americans' tax filings,
Yeah.
much less Americans overseas? So if they're going to bring down or help make the IRS more streamlined, it makes sense to address the citizenship-based taxation issue.
Yeah, absolutely. The key that is a wonderful point that you're making there. It is just so far beyond, and this is the thing when it's okay. It's the probationary employees that were fired, terminated, whatever the case may be, and now it's like, okay, well, they were the lower level
Yeah.
employees. They were
But
on this.
but but I'm sorry to interrupt, Anthony. It's not just the probationary employees being fired. It's also
Oh,
high-level people being fired. And
well, right. No,
well,
and
let me
that.
say this. Let me make a caveat to that. I don't know if that's the case with the IRS, but I have three cousins who are working for NIH, Social Security, and the Department of Agriculture. And all three of them had to put together lists of probationary employees. None of them were fired. People who are not on probation have been fired. So we'll see what the key
Oh.
is with the IRS.
Whoa.
So
Yeah, and by the way, Keith is in the Beltway, so he really has
for the
his.
moment,
Yeah,
yes.
he has his finger on the pulse of everything that's going on there. So that's good to know. Yeah, no, and what I would say is like, well, even if it is, because I'm not sure exactly who's been at the IRS, but I can say that very experienced, very good CPAs have been terminated because some of them came in the last few years. So you could have a senior level GS13, GS14 coming in, and they're still probationary because they haven't been here a long time, and so they have been terminated as well. So you're taking away some real superstars for sure at the IRS, absolutely. And then number two, for the probationary employees, the newer hires, well, guess what? A lot of them did get hired a year and a half ago, so they did get out of their training and they did start to get their own inventories. Well, now that they are fired, all the senior level employees are now going through their files to say, okay, which ones are you going to take? Which ones are you going to take? So the point being is that the IRS has no surplus headroom to handle the most complicated things. And I'm going to repeat the story because it just bears, it really bears in understanding the IRS's limitations. In 2018, I reached out to the group manager in New Haven on a case. I can't remember what it was about, but I always, like to make chit chat. I always like to get as much information as I can from the IRS employees. It always helps to have as much intel as possible. So I just casually asked the acting group manager. I said, "Hey, how are your audits going with foreign income and income and assets?" Then she laughed and she said, "Oh man, yeah, half my auditors refuse to do them." And I said, "Wow, that's nice. Why is that?" And she goes, "Because they're too complicated." So that's the thing you need to understand. Even IRS revenue officers, it's too complicated for them and they'll just not do the work. So, why is the IRS throwing, it has incredibly limited staff. And then when we look, they're getting out of these. And this is actually, I want to get this up before we get into John's presentation, because I think it really will help set the stage for this. So John, this is what I have right here. This is from, and I can put this link into the super chat for anyone else who wants to see it. I'll do that in a second. But this is the examination rate of the expatriate last return. Okay, this is what it is. They've actually put it. Now, these are audited from 15 to 18. We don't have anything current. This report is in 2020. But this is amazing. This is amazing. These are how many, this data is incredible. These are how many people are published in the Federal Register. This is the year. And this is the amount of examinations that were open and closed on expats who were filed to Form 8854, or not, because this is just looking at the Federal Register. Okay, well, how many audits were closed with tax increases? Well, here's the story right here. For a tax year 2015, there was 3, and then for 2016 there was 1. And the amount, I mean, if we look
Really?
at, yeah, if we
Wow.
look at these amounts, there is no way these amounts are covering the salary of one IRS employee. There is no way, because these changes, these exams, there's no way it's doing anything. So the fact is that if you do expatriate improperly, guess what? Hey, the IRS is really not something the IRS, you're really necessarily going to worry about. And that the chances of you having a big bill from these stats don't seem to be that big. So, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So I think with that, that's the introduction I wanted to lay down for John Richardson. That's the introduction I wanted yeah, right. I just want to get to this comment right here. Yeah, I don't think I will ever be able to trust Doge. Exactly. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, hey, yeah, I hear good things, but I hear good things all the time. We always hear good things from Washington, D.C., but we get different things, right? But I've been wondering what's going to happen. So I guess, yeah, that's we're just on for the ride. That's kind of where I'm at. Not a lot I can do to change it. But back to John. Oh, and I wanted to put that link in there to the report. Okay, it's in the. I'm just put it into super chat. So there, with that, John, we're all about helping Doge figure out how to find efficiencies, I suppose. Do you have any ideas on how they might find some efficiencies in the renunciation process here? Any ideas, John?
Well, for the process itself, I think they should simply download it to the governments where the people reside.
What do you mean, John? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, look at it this way. First of all, I think that it's reasonable to infer that the State Department is not interested in prioritizing renunciations, okay, as a
Correct.
service.
Right. And
That's clear.
right. And one reason we know that is because, look, they've been ordered to drop the renunciation fee, what, a year and a half ago? Was that how long ago? And they haven't yet.
It's more than 2 years now. It was in January of 2023 that they
Yeah.
agreed to do this, and it still has not dropped. Now, the indications are that it will eventually, but it is extraordinary that it has taken this long. I mean, either uh, they want to actively and deliberately delay the reduction, which I suppose is a possibility, because what that clearly has the effect of is getting people to postpone renunciations. I mean, there's a group of people out there who clearly are waiting for the fee to drop, right?
If I may interrupt real quick, there's a meeting that's going to occur with the U.S. State Department in the beginning of March to go over when the fee is going to be dropped, if it is indeed going to be dropped. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and you guys, and I'm just, again, incredulous because we have a court order. But man, isn't it nice to be the government?
Well, there is no court order.
Oh, there isn't. Oh, but it was an agreement, though, wasn't it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know is the answer, but if it wasn't, I think it was an agreement, but I'm not sure that it was an agreement that was actually officially worked into the lawsuit itself, right? That I don't know, but they did represent that they were going to lower the fee, and I think we've got to take them at their word. If you follow the regulatory process, it would appear, okay, that sometime later in 2025 that this is slated to happen. At least that's my interpretation of it. But I could easily be wrong. I mean, I would find it, even for the U.S. government, I would find it unbelievable for them to represent that they were going to do this and then not do it. Okay, I mean that's really over the top. So,
well, I mean, it's 2 years, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're going to do it. Just a question of when. I mean, maybe it'll take another 5 years. I mean, you got to understand, Anthony, it took the U.S. 10 years to put a man on the moon. Therefore, you would think for something as equally complex, right, as lowering the renunciation fee, why wouldn't it take 10 years? Certainly, lowering the fee is technologically as complex as the space program, isn't it?
So many multi-layered here. I think we have multiple layers, right? So,
There's that, but then there's also, I think, another explanation, or maybe they're linked. And, over the years, as I look at this, I have come to see the, the U.S. generally is now a victim of all its laws and regulations and procedures, making it very, very difficult to get anything done quickly. So I'm sure that that's a factor as well.
well, you know what? And you reminded me of something huge that I would say the renunciation process that we have, if we really think about it, is far more expensive for the government than they're letting on. Because look, the screen I just shared was about the IRS's costs and how much enforcement they were doing. The screen I didn't share is what is this costing the State Department? Look, layoffs are happening everywhere. There's not enough State Department employees. And the renunciation lines, correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, John, I mean, there's waits. There are waits to get into a lot of embassies to renounce. And so
There are.
I mean, we are burdening the State Department with things that shouldn't exist. If we had a tax system that wasn't ruinous, if we had actually had taxpayer privacy, if we didn't have these ruinous laws, we wouldn't need to create this additional work of renunciation.
If I may, Anthony, there's
Service.
what
Okay,
the,
at
the
$2,350. I mean, they're renouncing these people at a profit to the U.S. government.
I think that's wishful thinking. You could be right, John, but we don't have the we don't have the data. I mean, the government taking $2,350 is not necessarily going to be an efficient thing on itself.
I just want to add,
Yeah, go ahead, Keith. Go ahead, Keith.
Sorry, just one last
Absolutely.
point. On the waits that are currently at the U.S. embassies and consulates is going to get worse because they are firing through Doge people at the U.S. embassies and consulates across the world. So you can imagine that the waits are going to be higher, more delayed, regardless of whether it stays at the current fee or not.
So, all right, yeah. So let's try to figure out. Let's parse through what just happened here. Okay, so the United States government creates the world's worst tax regime, which forces people to renounce. The Department of Government Efficiency isn't necessarily looking at the cost of all this to the government. Meanwhile, Doge also makes it more difficult and lengthy to renounce, while not paying attention to the fact that the government did not lower the fee as agreed. So I think that's where we are right now. Am I missing anything in this entire absurdity stew?
Well,
no, I don't think.
Not for now. All right. So John, so with that, I want to get back to the question I asked. What were you talking about with your saying you want governments to renounce? What was that whole thing?
Well, I come back to, a couple of weeks ago, this is actually based on a blog post I wrote a couple of years ago, but a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about, how in the VARE case and the Accidental Americans case, the U.S. government has taken the position that there's no constitutional right to renunciation.
Right.
Which reinforces the idea of U.S. citizenship being fundamentally a property interest that the U.S. government has in its citizens. And I don't, although that may be an uncomfortable thing for people to hear, I don't think it's an unreasonable thing for people to hear. Given the obvious restrictions on expatriation. And even the inability to leave the United States. Except with government permission, via a U.S. passport and this sort of stuff, right? But, clearly, it's kind of like, update February. I got an email from somebody out of the blue last week, and, what he's saying, or they're a person of modest means, and all of a sudden they're being asked by their bank, the most frightening question of the 21st century. Are you? Or have you ever been a U.S. citizen, right? And, so what's the person's point? They can say yes, and who knows what happens. Maybe nothing happens, but it's an extremely, U.S. citizenship is an accusation, when it's being leveled by the banks or whatever, right? So, clearly this is somebody who left the United States at the age of 2, doesn't even remember ever having been there. they've got to be able to get out, right? They need a reasonable way to cut ties with the United States. I think that's in the interest of the United States. I think it's in the interest of the individual. And in this case, I think it's in the interest of Canada. And that reminded me of something I read years ago, which was a way to make renunciation less expensive and far more efficient. And, it starts from the principle that, I always go back to the law, right? That, to say that the requirement of, first of all, okay, the requirement is it's voluntariness and the intention to relinquish U.S. citizenship. And, you can't renounce the United States, there's no requirement, right, that this has to take place either in person or that it has to take place
Oh.
in the U.S. consulate or embassy. So, because now let's add to this, I think, a very uncomfortable reality. And the reality is that it's very, very bad for any country to have U.S. citizens living there, right? Because essentially, they're subject to these U.S. rules. They're really Trojan horse soldiers that are being used to extract capital, via the tax system from, say, Canada to the United States. And, it seems to me that it's very, very clearly in the interest. I'll use Canada as representative of any other country to not have U.S. citizens in the country, right? I mean, obviously that would be better for Canada. So, my thought was, why not rethink the renunciation process to make this more efficient, work better for everybody? Sell it to the government of Canada, sell it, in fact, to both the Canadian and U.S. governments on the premise that U.S. citizenship is really a property interest that the U.S. government has in the individual. Sell it to the government of Canada on the basis that they can essentially, because it's a property interest, buy back their citizens from the U.S. government, right? In other words, we'll call it the Great Dual Citizenship Buyback Program. Okay.
And this is actually, you could actually do this in the law. It's not just,
I think this is absolutely within the law.
well, your style is to have things supported by the law.
Yeah, and I think this works better, right across the board because it'll serve the U.S. government interest of getting out of this. It will serve the Canadian government interest of getting rid of U.S. citizens. Okay. And it will certainly serve the interests of the, of the individual who's caught in this quagmire, right? So I go on and I suggest, I wrote this on the base of the $2,350 renunciation fee. So, what happens is that the State Department simply designates foreign governments, giving them the right to set up, we'll call them official U.S. renunciation centers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And what the center would be, it would be combined with, the same way they do naturalizations for Canada, et cetera, which, often can be by video or Zoom or something like that. And then what happens, of course, we need some terminology. So the government of Canada becomes an official U.S. citizenship renunciation partner, okay, in the program. And then, because the costs go down, let's say we reduce the cost to $1,600.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens is the U.S. government gets 800 of that. The government of Canada gets 800. Why not? No, because
yeah,
they
that's a lot more.
see this as
Yeah.
getting something for relinquishing their rights to U.S. property.
Well, exactly, John. And right now, it's costing I believe it's costing the U.S. government far more, and also the opportunity cost. The time it spends on these are times it can't spend on other things. There's a huge opportunity cost with this. So I think I could really see your pitch. It's like, hey, look, we'll take care of the back end, U.S. government, and we'll give you a cut that's going to be bigger than the loss you're making currently.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
I mean, the U.S. can see this as simply selling off its citizens for revenue. Why not? It is, after all, a property interest. Okay?
Right, exactly. And we've gone over this multiple times
Yeah,
about how the U.S. government certainly looks at you as property. No question about it.
and the Canadian government gets a benefit by ridding itself of the problem of a U.S. citizen
Right.
in the
Oh, it's a
country, right?
win-all. I mean, this is efficient. I love it.
Yeah.
Now,
And
now I
then, and then the final thing is this, right? So we still have the problem of this poor individual who can't afford the renunciation.
that's the thing I want to focus on right
So
now. That's why I
here's
had
how
it.
that's handled. Okay, to encourage a Canadian a Canada-U.S. dual citizen residing in Canada to renounce, what the government of Canada does is then offers a tax credit, okay, for the fee, right, or for $800 of the fee, whatever, okay, to the individual. And so what happens is that every time, the government of Canada runs its naturalization days, which is fairly frequently, they simply do an add-on US citizenship renunciation day. Whoever runs the becoming a Canadian citizen for Canada simply becomes the person who, stands up there and administers the oath of renunciation to for the US thing, etc. It's done on video. And it seems to me it's completely in accordance with the requirements of the law. It's 1,000 times more efficient. It allows the U.S. to get compensation for loss of property.
Right.
It allows Canada to rid itself of a potential fiscal problem and future social services liability, if Americans have trouble saving for retirement. And it provides a way for the individual to, partially finance the U.S. citizenship renunciation. And what's there not to like about this, Anthony?
This is a win all around, and again, I just want to go back and focus on this highlight right here, so people can truly understand the issue. This particular individual cannot afford to comply with U.S. tax obligations. Keith Redmond, can you answer why that? Can you tell me why that is going to likely be a true statement? Why can't this person afford to comply with their U.S. tax obligations? Come on. What's wrong with them?
Well, what's wrong with that is because if they have a complicated life when their country of residence, the cost is prohibitive in getting a U.S. tax compliance professional to do that. The cost could be more than an individual's salary in 1 month just to comply. So
So you're saying that the
yeah.
relationship between, but I mean, hey, look, if someone's return is complicated, it's got to be because they got the money, right? That's why. Hey,
Well,
you
not
got the money?
necessarily.
Ah,
Not
okay. Why is that? Why
necessarily.
is that,
I
Keith?
mean, for example, what if they are self-employed? What if they have a business? What if they have some investments that people do in their countries of residence? You can easily have a 100-page tax return to file. I know people who have, and they're not wealthy people. They've just
Exactly.
had a lot of investments for their retirement or for their future aspirations. And the cost to file all those pieces of paper is, like I said, prohibitive because they don't have that extra money to do it. And then at the end of the day, when they do it, they find out they owe zero
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
So why should they file in the first place? Because they owe zero.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I think it's far more than that, right? The problem, the
Yeah.
real cost of the U.S. citizenship taxation regime, it is not contrary to what a lot of the tax people say. Well, you don't owe, it's just a compliance cost. Not so. Okay, the compliance cost is very, very small compared to the loss of opportunity for engaging in responsible financial planning. I mean, there's so many people I talk to who deliberately avoid things like Canadian TFSAs. By the way, you shouldn't. Okay, you
Yeah.
work around it, but they
Yeah.
deliberately avoid these things. Because they're subject to U.S. tax laws. So what's happening here, right, is they are deliberately
Oh,
not
yeah.
participating in
And tax
normal
advantaged, right?
retirement
Normal.
financial planning opportunities that are available to them and
That's true.
highly incentivized, right, in their country of residence. Put another way, they are prohibited under U.S. law from taking full responsibility for the financial and planning retirement for themselves and their families. And that's why, most of them need to get out of this, right? And this is also why governments around the world have have a clear fiscal and societal interest, if they understood this, in not having U.S. citizens living in the country. I mean, let me give you another simple example, right? Say in Canada and many other countries, there's a policy objective in the tax law. If you sell your principal residence, you're not going to be taxed on that, so you can buy another house somewhere, right? So what happens is the U.S. swoops in. In fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday morning who's planning on renouncing U.S. citizenship just because of this problem, right? So if you're a U.S. citizen, you sell your principal residence, you're going to be subjected to a capital gains tax. Now, two very, very negative things happen simultaneously that the government of Canada needs to be concerned about. The first is that directly conflicts with the policy objective in Canada that people ought to be able to sell their house to move laterally. All right, so all of a sudden they're not able to do that, right? In other words, if they, it sort of forces them to be stuck. But the second is, and this is at least as pernicious, is that all of a sudden a bunch of that capital that was earmarked under the policy objectives of the Canadian government to stay with the individual for the purposes of reinvesting in another house is being siphoned out of the country to the United States. And this is a very, very serious problem. And I think that one thing that governments ought to be doing to encourage their dual citizen residents to renounce is they ought to have a question on a tax return. Are you a U.S. citizen? And if so, did you pay any U.S. tax? Because if so, we want that back in the country, buddy. Okay, you're not just going to, let a country swoop in and interfere with our tax policy objectives of, Canadians being able to sell a home and be able to move laterally. We really can't tolerate that. Okay. So, you do that, you go right ahead. Okay, no problem. But we're not going to let you do that for free anymore.
Well said. Thank you, John. So,
if I may interrupt,
yeah,
because
go ahead, Keith. Absolutely.
there was somebody asking me a question in the comments, and unfortunately, I cannot join the comments for whatever reason. If you, the person that's in there that wants to know about a bank in France, just send me an email at us_overseas_advocate@outlook.com, and I'll respond to you.
Here, let me, and I'll put Keith's email up there so you can see that there. Where is
But what do you think about the idea of creating U.S. citizenship renunciation centers all around the world, run by the governments of those countries? Why is that not a better system?
Well, if this is what I would say, John, I think that Canada is a perfect test bed. I mean, what country has more U.S. persons that really are regular people than Canada? I'm not sure. So Canada would seem a perfect test bed. And then I'm concerned, but then my mind went immediately to this, right? Oh, the 51st state. So I mean, really, okay. So we're whatever that's about. So I'm like, well, what happens if Canada becomes a 51st state? Well, the answer is, well, guess what? You're no longer subject to the punitive tax regimes of the U.S. Of the United States of America, because you're no longer an expat. So now you're just in the regular pool of regular Americans' abuse, not the heightened abuse of the American expat.
Well, not necessarily, Anthony. I mean, they could impose a separate resident of Canada tax.
Oh, why not? Right? Why not? Right. Right. I'm applying logic and.
You got to understand that clearly any U.S. citizen living in Canada must be doing it for reasons of tax avoidance, right?
It's got to be something criminal. If it's not tax evasion, I'm gonna think it's something other criminal. Probably worse. Probably.
There's something nefarious going on here. There's something nefarious going on. So maybe, the thing to do is to get them out of just geographically out of anything north of the 49th parallel.
I love that
punitive taxation going.
All right, John, did you do a legal analysis on how this could happen? Because people love to see your legal analysis on how the process that we have is not necessarily the only process allowed by law.
Yeah, it's in the blog. I think.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go down then. Let's check it out. Okay. I want to hit that.
Surprised if I hadn't.
Yeah, I know that would be odd if you didn't. That would be very strange. That's what people come for. All right. Let's see where we get here. Okay. So let's see here. Oh wow, yeah. Oh yeah.
It would be presumably Part C, the legal.
Part C. That's my clue. Part C. We're going to go to Part C again. I put the link to this in the super chat. So all the other links you can get to by going through. So Part C, we'll go. Wow. All right, here it is. All right, the legal framework. Here we go. All right, perfect. This is what we want. All right.
So, this is exactly what the law says, right? Loss of nationality. Person who's a national of the United States, whether by birth or naturalization, shall lose its nationality by voluntarily performing any of the following acts with the intention of relinquishing U.S. citizen. Now, we have time today. We talk about how they're reinterpreting that. But in any case, moving on down, go ahead, move on down. You'll see 5, okay, is what we're talking about. Making a formal, let's look at this. Making a formal renunciation of nationality before a diplomatic or consular office in the United States in a foreign state in such form as may be prescribed. Now, let's look at that. Okay, so notice what that does not say. Don't go anywhere. What that does not say is that you have to do it in a U.S. consulate. It says making a formal, before a diplomatic or consular. So the first thing is that contemplates, I think being able to do it by video, Zoom or something. The second thing is it says before it doesn't say that that person has to administer the oath. Doesn't mean that person has to administer the oath, does it? So this opens up the door for, the people who do welcome everybody, welcome to Canadian citizenship, these government people who do that. I mean, all they need to do is, and after we've welcomed you all as Canadian citizens, we are going to hold a U.S. citizenship renunciation ceremony, and I will be presiding over that. And it will, of course, be videoed so that a consular officer, a diplomatic or consular officer of the United States is able to see that. And I will begin by certifying that we are definitely in Canada. This is taking place in Canada. This is not a Canadian naturalization ceremony taking place in Florida or something. No, we are absolutely in Canada. Okay, and then what will happen is that we'll call that person the master of renunciation ceremonies. We'll simply, before the U.S. diplomatic or consular officer, while they're watching by Zoom, we'll simply...
You just sounded like Arlo Guthrie there. I don't know if that was intentional.
We'll simply administer the oath of renunciation. So, I mean, my point is that this is clearly allowable under the existing law, right?
John, you know what you reminded me of? I live in the great state of Connecticut, and we have a Department of Motor Vehicle that's famous. It makes it on Reddit for how terrible it is, and people are amazed that in our Department of Motor Vehicles that there's a Dunkin' Donuts there. Because you're gonna be there a while essentially, and it's not that much fun. So the state of Connecticut, realizing this terrible problem of how terrible the DMV is, they said, you know what we'll do is we'll have the AAA, American Automobile Association. People can go there, pay a slight surcharge, but they can get it done in a timely manner. And then they kind of eliminated a lot of the renewal anyway, making it obsolete. So the last time I got a picture taken for my license was 2015. That should be and added AAA. So it's just like, it's essentially the same thing. Hey, we're so awful at, we're so awful at administration. Why don't we just outsource this to someone who could give us more money? Look, it's less work and more money. That's all we're trying to do because we're so vastly inefficient and we'll never correct ourselves. That's really all this is about. So here it is. And that's, so John is explaining how this could legally happen. Now, I would just say this again, if we had a tax system like every other civilized country in the world, none of this is necessary. None of this is necessary, but we don't. That's what makes this all necessary, is because it is so abusive and people can't afford to live.
Well, even if they don't necessarily owe U.S. tax, right? I mean, you emphasize tax system, but the problem is that normal people, first of all, if you have a lot of money and you can exist outside, the types of retirement planning programs that most people use, you can probably survive this, with fewer hits. But, what's happened is that it's impossible for American citizens who live permanently outside the United States and are kind of middle class and his financial stuff is in that other country. They can't survive and they need to get out.
Well, and
notice, Anthony, this is, I think, clearly allowable under the statute.
Yeah, and this next way, here's a streamlined way to renounce your citizenship: commit an act of treason. There you go. You could just simply commit an act of treason, and you have renounced your citizenship. Well,
So what would that act of treason be?
Yeah, I don't know. Attempting to overthrow the government some way. I don't know how exactly we could do that.
Well, why isn't moving to another country an act of treason?
That is right. Hey, you're making it harder for us to collect.
Well, for
from
some
you.
homeland Americans, they feel that's what it is.
Well,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
But,
I mean,
but
it's
look,
really
here's the thing, right? I mean, this is clearly a problem. It's a very serious problem for a lot of people. And like that note that I got from somebody a few days ago. I mean, this was not just, "Hi, John. This has been on the." This was somebody who was really undergoing a lot of stress and anxiety. No question about it. I mean, this is incredibly abusive stuff out there. Incredibly abusive. And I think that the only thing to do is, of course, to sever citizenship from tax residency, and there's no proposal out there that's even coming close to doing that. So we have to assume that U.S. citizens will continue to be, tax subjects. All right, which also means that by and large, uh, it's going to be difficult for them to retain U.S. citizenship, no matter what happens.
Let me throw out a question here, and if this is possible for another podcast, great. We're talking about renunciation here, which is good, but there are instances where maybe the person should not renounce. That needs to be taken a look at, like if they're the executor of a will in the U.S. or a revocable trust or something. Those are things to take into consideration if you're going to renounce. So.
Well, you always, Keith, look, the first question on renunciation is, what does your life look like after you renounce?
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, from a tax point, you become a non-resident alien. What does that mean? In various, from various points of view. And of course, nobody ever does that. Okay. And it's not like you can get, general answers, because so much of it depends on where you live, and tax treaties and stuff like that. But people aren't, they're not doing that because they don't even.
Well, John, I think this would be a great topic, because I think you mentioned the other day, or maybe in a tweet, and I think this might be a great one. I'd like to hear if our audience thinks it would be the next one to do. You mentioned somebody who renounced, and then ended up getting just awfully taxed on their Social Security, and they were given the wrong advice. So
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think I can recap that really, really quickly to show you the dangers of not getting good, of using, weak advisors. Okay.
Yeah, that actually ended up. But I want to stay on this, and I think that would be that would be great.
It would be another good topic to
I think
go
it would be
over.
really. I think we should do that, and we're teasing it right now, so I think we should. So, I think the committee has spoken. So, all right. So I mean, it's just hilarious that there's two ways. There's two ways to renounce your citizenship. Do it formally written, or commit treason. Okay, so there's your.
Well, there's actually seven. But the point is that.
Oh, right.
It's very, very difficult to, since about the last 2 years, and this is something else we could do a podcast on. But about 2 years ago, what happened was that the way the State Department was interpreting these laws changed, making it far more difficult to get backdated relinquishments, et cetera. Changed very dramatically.
Oh, all right. So we're having. Oh boy. So there's a lot of great things going on with the government. The government doesn't sound very efficient here, John. I gotta say, it doesn't.
Well, it's not only is it not efficient, but it's very unaware of what it's doing.
Unaware and inefficient. All right. Well, there you go. That's.
I mean, that's what people think of my proposal.
I think this makes a lot of sense. This is like the AAA, and I think this is the thing. Most people will pay a surcharge. Hey, do you want the convenience fee? We're going to charge you a convenience fee of $20. Okay, what does that mean? You don't have to go to the United States Embassy or consulate. Oh God, yes. Oh God, yes. Thank you. And then again, that's $20. The United States Treasury wasn't going to get. Now they're, and it's about the money with them. So I mean, they should be pretty excited about that.
Well, they look. The only issue. I mean, if you look at 877A. It tells you everything about their attitude towards their citizens. If you don't have much money, they don't care. Go ahead and renounce. Probably they're happy to be rid of you.
Yeah, because you're a liability. Get out
I
of
mean,
here. Yeah.
well, you may not be, you're a potential liability.
Potential, right? And that's
If
enough.
you
That's
have
enough.
money, then we're losing something by you renouncing, so we want to go after you. But it's all about the money. That's all it's about. Okay.
Exactly. So, and we're just telling the federal government you're going to get more of what you love, other people's money. That's what you love. I mean, you love it. You can't get enough of it. You're going to get more of this with John Richardson's proposal to privatize the renunciation process. Makes a lot of sense to me. Yep, John pulls it out, the details more out here. I mean, this is efficiencies and low cost. I mean, this is Doge all written all over it.
Sure.
I mean,
Absolutely.
we should be expecting a call any minute now to say, oh my God, we've really found something here. I mean, of course, they could change the U.S. tax system so it's not so freaking abusive. But hey, if we're not going to do that,
Then they wouldn't be America, right?
America would cease. You know, it's like
We know.
salt without any flavor, right? Americans without ruinous taxation. It's like, are we Americans anymore?
Look, I think the truth is that most Americans love their tax system. Okay. I think they actually love it. It gives them something to do. But let's look what I wrote. This is a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of this new process? Part E, right at the bottom.
Yeah, benefits. Oh, yeah, and I mean, by the way, this is written before Doge became. I mean,
Yeah.
Doge was created by Obama, but it really wasn't doing too much. So this is John Richardson, his keen insight, knowing what's going to be changing. Look, you are ahead of the game. You're
Ahead of the game.
You are headed. We are in the cutting edge of what is going to happen. The great John Richardson. So
Well-
walk us through these
Well, here's the
efficiencies.
benefits, right? I guess this would have been the conclusion of this. First of all, hold on.
Oh, go
Back up a
Sorry,
little bit.
yep.
First
Oh,
is the individual.
yeah.
Okay. I mean, clearly, well, not for every single person, okay, but for a very high percentage of U.S. citizens living in other countries who are tax residents of those countries and trying to survive, I think almost every one of them would say that they were better off without having to deal with the U.S. tax system. And the only way out of that is to not be a U.S. citizen. So it's a clear benefit, okay, to the individuals, because at the moment, all roads really do lead to renunciation.
And this is
I've
a
seen
perfect
that.
time for me to ask Keith a question here.
Sure.
Keith, here it is. So tell me about the benefits of being an American overseas. If something happens to you, you know, like, hey, let's just say you need to get out of the country. It's the United States, but the United States government's there to help you out, right? I mean, they're covering you. This military worldwide is there to help you at any moment. Is that right, Keith?
Well, if they do help you, you do have to reimburse the US government for the help that you receive. And that, at least it was clearly written on the US State Department website. You do have to sign a promissory note that you will repay the US government for any evacuation. Number one. Number two, historically, the US government or the US military hasn't always been there to evacuate Americans. In Yemen, for example, it was the Russians and the French who evacuated Americans, not the US military. And there's other examples like that too. So there's somewhat of a myth that the US Marines are going to come to the rescue. Sure, under certain conditions, they may do that, but most times you got to reimburse them. You know, so
Oh,
you would think
God.
that citizenship-based taxation
Yeah.
would pay for that, and that would be a very good benefit. It would, but that's not the case.
Keith, that would not justify keeping U.S. citizenship because for middle
No,
class,
I know that, but Anthony asked me if there was a
yeah, but for
possible
middle
benefit.
class people, this is really about they need to establish a clear path for retirement and financial planning.
Absolutely,
That's what-
absolutely. And they can't do that right now. They're financially inhibited
right.
in their countries of residence.
That's right. And the second thing is now we look to the benefit of the countries where U.S. citizens live. Look, there's no question. I mean, even if we look at this on the level of FATCA compliance costs and stuff, there's no question that having U.S. citizens living in your country is a problem.
Now let me be a contrarian for a moment. What would you say about? I'll use France as an example. American pensioners or retirees in the U.S. going to France to retire. They do have a benefit having U.S. citizenship in that instance. Would
It's
you agree?
also a problem for France because they're paying tax at a lower rate than other French residents.
Right. True. True.
Problem for France. Look,
So, guys, what I'm hearing
having
is that
a set of people in your country that are subject to coercive a coercive regulatory regime from another country, okay, can never be a good thing.
well, I would say this is what's the value? Can we put a monetary value on the average value to the countries of not having Americans in there? It's got to be substantial. So much so, I think these countries could offer a bounty. Hey, renounce your U.S. citizenship. Not only will we'll take care of all the fees, we'll give you some money in your pocket. And truly, the government, that country could substantially benefit by having less Americans.
So do a buyout. Do a buyout.
Basically,
John,
right?
John,
What I
John
said,
had suggested
great
that.
dual. Here's how it should be: the great dual citizen buyback program.
There
Right?
you go. Oh, okay. That's what you're talking about.
U.S. citizenship to be a proper, which it clearly is. Okay,
It's a property interest, and so okay.
So I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. And then we have the benefits to the United States.
Come on, look at this.
Rid themselves of a problem,
But also,
and they get a bit of revenue out of it.
well, it's a way for them to eliminate the problem without admitting any fault or any error or doing anything awful. Like, oh yeah, hey, we're just gonna do it. It gives them an out. It gives the U.S. government an out where they could still, hey, we're still the bad boy and we still own you, but we'll just for efficiency, we'll just go this way here, and that's.
Well, I think it would be good for international relations generally, right?
Yeah, that would be great, right? America, the esteem of America. It's like, whoa, what a great country. It doesn't use the tax code as a weapon against the world and its own citizens as the conduit of it.
Well, this is the problem, right? I mean, do you really think? I'll ask the two of you the question. I mean, do you really think it's reasonable for U.S. tax policies to essentially attack and run counter to the tax policies in the country where people live? Do you think that's good?
No.
No, I don't
No,
think so.
not at all.
That's why this is good for all of these countries, okay, to look, first of all, I think these countries are way behind the curve. I mean, as it stands, I think it'd be perfectly reasonable for every country to ban immigration from a U.S. citizen if it's a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
I mean, all you're doing is, it's like you're admitting somebody to live in the country, okay, who has dramatically increased chances of needing social assistance, all this type of stuff. Plus, they're gonna, they just can't do stuff, right? And no matter how I look at it, I don't see how it can be to the benefit of any country to have a U.S. citizen living there. And there are clear detriments, right? I mean, the detriments just vary sort of from country to country. So this is something that, and then, I mean, if we look at the level of FATCA, add this interesting gem. I got a message from a journalist a week or two ago asking about this question. So understand, right, that under FATCA, what's happening is that the banks are required to transmit information about Canada's residents, Canada's tax residents who happen to be U.S. citizens to the IRS. Like, how can this be considered to be a good thing?
Well,
right?
It's more than that, John.
There's no way
you don't have to. You don't have to be an
States.
American to have your information sent over. You could be suspected of being American. That's enough.
Well, not only that, but the point is that many of these are dual citizens, so they're also Canadians, right? So I mean, you have to see this through the lens.
Well, yeah, how the U.S. destroys your Canadian citizenship. Like, we don't want
tax to the IRS, right?
Yeah.
And that really is an extraordinary thing. And then you get into this whole brouhaha a week or two ago about this group of people getting access to Social Security numbers and tax information. And so now we have that going on, and I think that violates every tax treaty that the United States has with any other country.
Absolutely.
Because all of these tax treaties say that information about taxpayers won't be released except in conjunction with, tax administration. Now it's being released for no reason at all. And, it would seem to me that it would be reasonable for countries just to pull out of the FATCA IGAs for that reason alone. But
I
look,
think so, right?
obviously, nothing good can come from having a U.S. citizen being a permanent resident of your country. So this allows you to proactively solve this problem in a way that's good for international relationships. It's good for Canada. It's good for the United States. It's good for the individual. What's not to like about it? Nothing, as far as I can see.
Yeah, and I think this is your great conclusion right here that really sums it up well. Neither individual U.S. citizens abroad nor their organizations are prepared to demand that the United States sever citizenship from U.S. tax residency. At most, they will advocate for a more perfect form of citizenship taxation. Given this reality, I propose making renunciation more affordable, more humane, and more available than it is under the current system. Access to renunciation, right? That's a fundamental right. That is the reason for this proposal. So, we're kind of tongue-in-cheek, but not really. Because we're hoping for changes to the U.S. tax code. We haven't seen it. We have seen golden visas offered.
A gold card.
Gold card, right? Hey, look,
Yeah.
if you're a wealthy investor, because we want your property, you are going to be our property. We're not going to tax your property overseas, unlike regular Americans. So we're seeing a complete different tax treatment depending on what your nationality status is. It just sort of totally ignores that Constitution, but the government's been doing that for a while. So that's pretty obnoxious, though, and that's a pretty obnoxious thing when we've been demanding and telling relief, and it was a campaign promise to end double taxation for Americans overseas. So the campaign non-promise of creating a golden ticket into the U.S. is what we get. That's what we get. Well, thanks for nothing there. None of those people are Americans, by the way, that you're doing all these favors for. So it's like, and do you really want to come to America where you are treated like property? Do you really want to do that? Think about it hard and clear. Would you want to be part of a country that would give advantages to people who aren't Americans over Americans? Would you want your children to grow up in such a country? Well, hey, look, you did okay because you were a foreign natural, but your kids might not be, and so they're going to be treated as awful as every other American. So be careful about the entity that you're joining. Really, completely unasked. It's like the thing unasked for by any constituency is the thing we get. So really, would be helpful if we actually start fulfilling on some of our campaign promises. It really would be if we made some movement towards that. But anyway, so I do want to get to some questions here. Got some comments here, so let's get to some of these here. Hopefully we've got some good ones here. All right, Johnny Thunders is here. What does Johnny Thunders have to say here? What's the plan with the AI supercomputer? I would say the AI supercomputer is I think where they're going is trying to line up automated penalties. That's what I think they're doing. And if you look at that chart I have of the 8854s, really there's no meaningful examination of people who renounced, and a lot of people just stopped complying. You're looking at the people who renounced their citizenship with the Secretary of State. What about all the people that just sort of stopped? Well, they can
never complied.
Never complied. They can, they can do that. Oh, and Johnny Thunders has a question for you here, Keith.
What's that?
Which banks in France will take Americans? Do you know that?
Yeah, that's what I interrupted before. I told him
okay, that was a question. Sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah. That's okay.
Right. Are you able to answer him?
Yeah, I told him. I gave him my email address, which should be in my my name, US_overseas_advocate@outlook.com. Shoot me a message, and I'll let you know what banks.
Great. All right. So, great. Fantastic. Borchell, good morning to you, Borchell. Great to see you. Doge's biggest mistake so far is not importing John Rich's for yes!
There you go.
There we go. There we go. There we go. That comment gets a star. Oh, yeah, there we go. That's absolutely right. I mean, come on. What are we doing here? How serious should we take Doge without John Richardson on it? I don't know. It's like, why don't we get, like, we want top notch legal analysis. We
Yeah,
want
not 22-year-olds that
not
know
this.
nothing.
We need the best. Why can't we get the best? That's a great. All right, and here we go. Rob B. Glass-Steagall is reinstated to free Clinton Smith and it's repealed. We will never have honest market. I don't know when we had honest markets, Rob. I mean, I think, you go back. I was just talking about this with my dad. Like, 1929 was a curious year. Curious year. I got to say, and I just sort of think about that. It's like, man, all of a sudden the thing's going great, and then a bunch of people lose money. Well, we know when markets go south, not everybody loses money, right? So you always got to wonder about that. So who knows how long this manipulation's been going on? I don't really trust anything in the financial markets. And you want to repeal FASB 56? All right. I'm not sure what that is.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, if you have a link so that I could check that out, Rob, I'd love to take a look at that. What exactly what's going on with that and how that could help. No person alive likes anything about the system unless it is a government parasite. Well, I mean, there's people who
I
are
don't know about that.
Yeah, no, this isn't true. I don't think that's
It's
actually
not true.
because there's people who are indoctrinated to say it's a good thing. Oh no, it's a good thing. Okay, why is that? Because they tell me it's a good thing. So I would say I would disagree with that. But a lot of government parasites certainly would be a fan, but it's not everybody. And Keith, and I don't mean to call Keith. By the way, I am not implying, Keith, that your friends are government parasites. I am implying.
Oh no, my cousins. Yeah,
your cousins. Yeah, no, but
yeah.
and again, this is what I've always heard from IRS employees, and I think this is even part of their training somewhere. It's the 80-20 rule. In their audits, they know about the 80-20 rule. Basically, 20% of the IRS does 80% of the work.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say. So, and when you find that 20%, you got to treat them like, you got to pick up that phone. You got to treat them like gold. You're like, okay, thank you very much. That's why you just want to be, because I would say there are some who are, do the bulk of the work. If you wanted to destroy the IRS, fire that 20%, which I do believe some of that 20% has been fired. I do believe some of them have been fired. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, here we go here. Heloise Hunter, hey, thanks for joining us today. Impossible to live and function. Heloise is just pointing out, the fact it's like,
obviously. Well, it's obvious to everybody who understands.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're intentionally punitive. The law singles out to say, hey, look, if we tax expats in this way, we can get more money. Never happens.
I think something that should be added here. Over the last few years, there have been more academic, professorial articles, if you will, about citizenship taxation. And I don't believe I've ever seen a single one that has acknowledged, referenced, or discussed in any way, shape, or form the fact that the U.S. does have a more punitive tax system for Americans abroad, right? Because of, of these foreign income streams and foreign assets and stuff.
No, they haven't. Yeah. Because they don't live it. They don't live it.
Because it allows them to, it sort of reinforces the idea that somehow foreign tax credits and the foreign earned income exclusion solve this problem, which is, of course,
a myth.
Well, it's factually inaccurate. Whether it's a lie or not depends on how much they really know. But the kindest thing you could say is it's factually inaccurate.
Yeah. We're gonna get. I know there's a comment that came in from Jason Miller. Jason, I'll get to. Jason, yeah, you're reading that. I know, right?
I need a cigarette now.
All right, we'll get to Jason's comment right now. All right, we'll just get to Jason's comment right now. Okay. All right. Maybe. Lawyer report, right? A little bit, right? I guess maybe we're indulging a little much.
And actually, Jason, I'm going to ask you a question. Give me an example of a discussion among lawyers that you think would not be lawyer porn.
Hey, we're doing pretty good. Hey, with that is our standard, Jason. You got to compare us to other lawyers, not to other human beings. Okay, that's not the right standard. Okay, so we're doing pretty good. I gotta say, thanks, Jason. I love your frank comment. Thank you so much. Johnny Thunders has a comment, and we can get to this one. He's got a few, and I'll just get them lined up.
Yeah. So So if you look at 877A, right, what it says is specifically is meets the requirements of this title, meaning Title 26, okay, of the Internal Revenue Code. That's the language that's used. Okay, no, not if you filed. You would have had to have filed properly, with all the forms, et cetera, et cetera. The statute does not say filed, every for 5 years prior to renunciation. What it says is met the requirements of Title 26 for the 5 years, and often there's a huge difference, right? All kinds of people file without meeting the requirements.
Yeah, what I would add, the thing that I see is people think that they have to file for 5 years. No, you have to be in compliance. If you didn't have a filing obligation, you don't need to file. That's a big thing. And then the other thing too, and I think we covered this before to some degree, the Form 8854 is sort of an interesting form because it combines something that really doesn't have to be that way. That if it's really the 8854 is supposed to be a form for the covered expat. Well, most people aren't covered expats, so why they need to file the 8854? And I think there's some combining, and I think there's some regulatory issues that they would have, especially post Loper Bright, in enforcing the someone not filing an 8854 who isn't otherwise in compliance and who is otherwise not a covered expat.
Yeah. So here's the issue on that. That is interesting. What they've done is they are saying that the Form 8854 is where you certify that you're compliant for 5 years. And that's the reason why people file that, right? If they're not a covered expatriate, because that's where the 5-year certification takes place. However, if you were to look at the statute itself, there's no mention specifically of the method, okay, that's used to either certify the 5 years of compliance or whatever. So I've often considered the question of whether you could just simply send a letter to the Treasury Secretary saying, "Hi, I just wanted to confirm that I'm compliant with Title 26 for the 5 years, and I just renounced."
Yeah, and you know what? There's a lot of things that aren't required to use the form. You can actually, and I remember doing this years ago. You actually don't need to use an IRS Form 1040 to file your tax returns. You can create your own form as long as it has the same information. I do recall that being so. I would imagine that letter with the required. Hey, look, here's all the required information.
Well, Anthony, pull up on your screen 877A, Internal Revenue Code 877A, and let's look what it actually says.
All right. Okay, there we go. Okay, here it is. Here's 877.
All right, so move down, okay, when you get to the definition of covered expatriate, okay, move down slowly, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going further down.
Who knew this would be so complicated?
Keep going. Hold on. We need the part where it says what a covered expatriate is.
All right, I think I'll just do it.
Oh, you're on 877A. You want 877. 877,
well,
please. 877 is where the covered expat test is.
Somebody might have said
All right. Yeah. Click on that. Okay. Now go slow enough so we can see what it is. Yeah, it's section 2 right there. Okay. Now let's look at it. Right. Let's look at the whole thing. Okay. Now here are the people. So the first way to be a covered expatriate is if your average net income tax greater than 124,000. That's up to 2,000 and 6,000, right? Adjusted for inflation. The next thing, the net worth is 2 million and remains that way. But let's look at C, which we're really talking about today for some reason. Such individual. Now, what this says is, right, so such individual fails to certify under penalty of perjury
that
he has met the requirements of this title for the 5 preceding taxable years. Now, it says, or fails to submit such evidence of such compliance as the Secretary may require. Now, the way that's written, okay, A or B, either one of those things, all right, would seem to make you a covered expatriate, right? So in other words, let's say you're in a situation where you maybe this doesn't work. You send a letter to the Secretary of Treasury under perjury. I met the requirements. Does that get you out of it? Well, maybe not. If the secretary requires you, well, fails to submit such evidence of compliance. The question
Yeah.
that can be construed to mean the 8854. Okay. I mean, I think it's an open question, but you can see that the way that thing is phrased is what I think gives IRS the rope, if you will, to say, well, we are going to require that you certify on the 8854, even if the 8854 doesn't apply to you. So maybe that's the answer there, right?
Yeah, well, and again, but it always cracks me up that like, hey, we're going to make you a covered expat. It's like, right, but I don't have anything. So what happens? Oh, nothing.
Yeah, notice also on this that it doesn't say filing returns. This such individual fails to certify met the requirements of this title, meaning Title 26.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, is why FBAR compliance is not a requirement.
Right. That's the other thing too. People are like, oh, I need, I need my 6 years of FBARs. I saw that the other day. It's like, no, you're conflating the thing. Like you might be using the streamlined program, which uses six years of FBARs. There is no absolutely FBAR compliance is not at all required. Not at all in any way. That's
Repeat that again for people to know.
Okay.
F4 require. Go ahead.
FBAR compliance is not required at all to avoid covered expat status and to renounce. It's not at all. It's not part of Title 26. It's part of Title 31. And a lot of the tax industry doesn't pick up on the nuances. They just sort of lump it together.
Yeah.
And things are very black and white. And that's sort of the problem that I see because it's still going on, Keith. It's still going on. The fear mongering, people I talk to who will talk to, oh, they said I had to do this. I had to do this. I
Yeah.
had to do this. Like, all right, yeah, they might, but there's not requirements. And a lot of things come down to, okay, well, here's the actual law. This is what they actually do. Yes, there's the tax industry wisdom, but many times the tax industry wisdom collapses under the slightest scrutiny. And so I think that's one of the reasons why people do like this channel is because we do get into the weeds, we get into the nuances because it is also, critical. There's so many little things. And maybe this is a good place to go because we always say, there's no cookie cutter answer to all
I say that
things.
all the time, and I get a lot of pushback from people where they say to me, I just need examples of, and I say, no, everybody's situation is different. Full stop.
Everybody's situation is different, and that's what we try to preach. There's not one big. Here's the big solution that fixes everybody. No. There's a lot of tools.
It would be
that we
wonderful
use.
if that was the case.
Yeah,
but
no,
it's
I would
not.
love that. Would that make things a lot simpler for us, right? What I would suggest is if you haven't joined Keith's Facebook group, go here to do that. Great community because here, if like you go to a lot of forums around the internet, you're just gonna hear the same thing. This is what it is. This is what it is. Oh, no, the treaty doesn't block your pension. Oh, no, it doesn't. I know it doesn't. And that's what you're really going to get. On this group, you're going to get more nuance and more reality. Which is far more helpful to people than I think the standard kind of nonsense. And also, you can follow Keith on Twitter at Keith Redmond. And let me throw up Keith's email again. Keith, describe to people what you do, how you help them.
What I do is, just so I know, I don't get into the meat and potatoes of tax compliance. What I do is I go through the different options based on your particular profile and experience and the touchstones that you need to take a look at. Like, for example, is renunciation for you or is it not for you? How should you do it? Just as an example. And we take a look at the different options, do a risk assessment. And so that way you have a short and long-term strategy based on your particular situation. And the idea is to mitigate the fear and to critically think and analyze your situation. So that's what I do.
That's great, Keith. Well, there it is. So you reach out to Keith on his email right there. We do have one final question here from Borchell. We don't leave Borchell hanging in there. When renouncing your citizenship, do you need to withdraw your 401k and pay penalties if you are not of retirement age?
Well,
Go ahead,
First
John.
of all, if you're not a covered expatriate, none of that matters. Number one. Number
Yeah.
two, if you are a covered expatriate, you're not going to be hit with the early withdrawal penalties on it. Okay. Three, there's a difference between what are called, if you're a covered expatriate, there's a difference between what are called specified tax return accounts and deferred compensation plans. If it's a U.S. deferred compensation plan, you probably can hold on to it. If it's a non-U.S. deferred compensation plan, call a lawyer.
Great advice. Well, to that. Well, that's a great segue here. If John, where do all roads lead to?
Oh, there's simply no question about it. You know, if you want a life, you better renounce.
And I think just, you know what, if you want less drama too, I mean, there's a lot of drama going on in being an American. Oh my God, who knows what's going on?
Exciting citizenship to have. There's no citizenship in the world that takes so much time, right?
Oh my God, right? You got to, I know, right?
Every U.S. citizen outside that wakes up, and the first thing they think about is, what does my U.S. citizenship mean to me today?
And you know what Homeland Americans say? That's the price of freedom.
Price of freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's pretty clear. I mean, there are countries that are less free than the United States, no question. But I think it's pretty clear that the United States is not a bastion of freedom and democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something else.
Unfortunately.
And so if you are thinking of renouncing your citizenship, look no further than John Richardson. You could reach out to him at citizenshipsolutions@protonmail.com. And I did want to mention something about
or if you find that you're subject to deportation because you're a U.S. citizen, that will come.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. He help you there. I did want to bring something up that we have been doing. Guys, we talked about the Berea case about how there's certain people who now are entitled to money because they can claim tax credits against the net investment income tax. We have been doing that,
Yeah.
and I did read online that some people are like, oh, the IRS hasn't put up the forms. They don't need to. The forms work. The forms work as they are. So I do want to just tell people, like, if you want, if you're looking for tax prep for 2024, we'd love to help you out. And also, if you're looking for to amend your returns because maybe you overpaid way too much, and there's that case, go here. Go to my firm. Go to irismedic.com prep. We have a great system. We do have some capacity still left for this year, even though that's running out soon. So I would act quickly. A lot of the best firms are already. I know a lot of my friends are already booked out. They have no capacity. We still have a little bit, so you got a little time to act. And also, if you want to amend your returns, or actually even just get a second look at a lot of things, because there is that traditional tax industry way they look at things, black and white, very black and white, especially in offshore disclosures. Oh my goodness, very black and white, not really thinking creatively. If you want a little bit of higher level of insight into your issue as a way to make the process as easy for you as possible and cost the least amount of money, you could also reach out there. You could book us. You could book there at the same link as well if you want to go there, or you can go to our official page here for offshore. It doesn't matter. I'll just put this back. I'll put this up here. If you want to just go there, if you're thinking about you got an international issue, even FBAR penalties, wondering what to do about them, go there. All right, so let's see here. We got a few more. Okay, great. All right, thanks, Burchell. Thanks so much. And there you go. Oh wow, this is it. Jason, you might have our closer right here. So basically, you guys are saying U.S. citizenship is like being married to a borderline.
Well, it would include that. You mean borderline
includes that
disorder? It would include that, but much more.
Okay, much more. Well, she's got a gun. She's waving around a gun that's loaded too. So I think we have to add that in there too. Yeah.
And to be fair, wife or husband.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And to be fair, right. Someone very abusive. Right. Very, very unpredictable and dangerous. There you go. And I think that's well stated. All right. Thanks so much, Jason. Thanks so much, Burchell. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Thanks for your questions. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, John Richardson. This is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic, and I think we have our next topic. And so also a lot of changes going on. There's no better time to subscribe than now if you haven't. So be sure you subscribe. Turn on those notifications so you know when we are going live. This is Anthony Parent for IRS Medic. Thanks for watching.